Manchester United is in advanced stages and soon could unveil Dan Ashworth as the new director of football after talks have been going on for quite some time now to try and price him out of his job at Newcastle United. It is expected that it's a matter of time that this man is going to be priced out. Now, the question is, why on earth is Ineos Sajim and his entire team so fascinated with this guy who barely played football at the biggest level? Welcome to the United Hotspot. My name is Webb, and in this video, I'm here to tell you exactly why Dan Ashworth could be the right man to lead our rebuild or rebirth of Manchester United. Now, just to give you a brief history of Dan Ashworth, he's a 52-year-old former footballer, played as a defender, but the biggest club probably he played for was a one Wisbech Town in the UK. And in the year 2000, Wisbech Town could not afford to pay players anymore. They ran bankrupt, and this forced him to retire. When he retired, he first went to Cambridge United as an academy director before moving to West Bromwich Albion, where he was the director of the Academy of Excellency at West Brom. When the assistant manager of the youth team resigned, he was assistant youth manager, team manager, before later being promoted to the manager of the youth team. Now, the head, the manager of the team from assistant. Now, meaning he has got some abilities when it comes to coaching. That makes him a technical guy. Very important if you're going to be a director of football. Now, after that, in the year 2012, he was confirmed as the FA Elite Football Development Director. Now, this for me is where the real work that defines him was done. I'll come back to it in a bit, but let me move on a bit to just summarize for you his journey. So, in the year 2018, he was still FA Director of Elite Football Development. He was rumored to be wanted by Manchester United. In fact, these rumors looked so imminent and real that it was later confirmed that he was resigning. He resigned from his job at the FA, only for him to be announced as the technical director of Brighton and Hove Albion. Now, everyone was shocked because just when we thought he was going to join Man United, he joins Brighton. And from Brighton, does his good work. His biggest success at Brighton was him bringing in Moises Caicedo, who we all know was eventually in the last summer the biggest holding midfielder in the world, and became one of the most expensive players in the history of sport after joining for over 100 million from Brighton to join Chelsea. And now he spent a few just over a year over 3 years at Brighton. Then he joins Newcastle United. And in 2022, of course, that is when he joined Newcastle. After the new takeover of these oil-rich guys, he comes to Newcastle to lead their rebirth. The biggest success for him at Newcastle could have been the signing of my son's favorite player, Alexander Isak, who he's doing decently well as a striker for Newcastle. He's also involved in players like Kukurea, Chelsea, and the likes. But let me take you back to 2012. And whereas people think Dan Ashworth is being brought in because of his work at Brighton, his work at Newcastle, that has been evidently impressive. For me, I think it is with the FA that he did the work that United needs now. Let me take you to the year 20, when he was at the FA as the director of elite football development. His biggest KPI was for him to try and change the identity of English football. In fact, there was hope that his touch on English football was going to deliver a major title that had eluded England since the early 1960s, if not the mid 1960s. I think since 1966. Now, this is what exactly he did. Him and Gary Southgate, who later was the under 21 coach from 2013, the following year after Dan Ashworth's arrival, in 2014 presented him and Gary Southgate and a few others presented what they called the England DNA. Now, Dan Ashworth was the mastermind of this England DNA. What is the England DNA, you could ask? Now, the England DNA was a very smart, new way of doing things to try and change English football. Remember, for the longest time, English football was known not for having a particular identity of play based on footballing abilities. No, the English football was mostly known for a fighting spirit of passion, and that spirit, England were known to fight and play with a spirit, but not ever known for having a particular identity. Now, this is exactly what he changed, and this started with young players, with the youth teams, but the whole direction was for the future to try and build an England senior team or England senior teams, because it included the men and women that would go on to compete and win titles. Now, this is just what you're looking at there is the core of the England DNA that they presented in 2014. Of course, it included purpose, the process, the DNA five core elements, the time scales, playing your part, and of course, takeaway messages. That was, but here is the core, the DNA connections. Of course, you see England in the center, and at the top, the playing philosophy, talent and identification philosophy, coaching and learning philosophy, and the performance support philosophy. This was the plan, and this is exactly what you're expected to do as a director of football. Give direction and break down how we are going to head into that direction. Now, I'm just showing you how he did the same with England, and this is public information. It's out there for you to enjoy and study and try to understand how this guy is so detailed when it comes to football, and why what he did with England is exactly what Manchester United needs, because part of what he did here was defining who an England national team player should be. That's the master. That's the gist of the England DNA. So define the England identity for the future. Share what we do and why we do it. Increase contacts. Share the journey. Define the clear development plan for players. Consistency across teams and the golden thread. So he clearly defined the process. The values will become our daily habit, and in turn our culture. The audience, the players, national coaches, clubs, grassroots, professional clubs, and coaching again. Now, this was for England. Then the core DNA element are where who we are, how we play. The future England player, now replace that with Man United. The future Man United player, how we coach and how we support the player. These are key important elements that will guide whichever coach you will be working with and give him proper direction on where we want to go. Now, the England DNA, and someone would ask, how was he going to put this together? So this England DNA was derived from a study. They wanted to build a cosmopolitan approach to how they do things. Instead of not being known for anything, they were now beginning to identified by many things, put together so many ideas. In fact, they say they started 9 countries, footballing countries, including Spain, including Brazil. Of course, the passing of Spain, the tenacity of South Americans. They started France, and how they're good on their transition. They started the discipline of Germany teams. So they wanted to bring an identity that would integrate all that into how they play. Now, that's why we're able, the aftermath of that was England finishing at the semi-finals of the World Cup in 2018 and at the final of the Euros. England, people feel, could actually win the Euros this year. Why? Because of the template that this man, Dan Ashworth, together with Gary Southgate, built. And people were asking, why was Gary Southgate trusted with this England job? Because him and Dan Ashworth, while they were working with the junior teams, as with Dan Ashworth as the director of elite football development, certainly he had to work a lot with the coaches of the England junior teams. They worked together in building an identity that would help these young players of England, very talented, but give them a structure. And in that structure, they have seen success. That's what Dan Ashworth is good at. Forget about the player. That's why he's the perfect guy for director of football. And people think he's coming to recruit players. No, his job is about that. His is to give direction and give a proper strategy in how are we going to play, how we play. He defined how England should play in possession, out of possession, in transition, and formation. How are they going to play? That's the director of football, and that's what they do. And then, of course, breaks down the in possession model. I will not go into the details of this document. The in possession model and phases. How are we counter attacking? How are we in our transition? How are we retaining and building? How are we progressing and penetrating, creating and scoring? All this he defined. This is the job of a director of football. These are things that have been for the longest time lacking at Manchester United. The out of possession model. How do we do emergency defending and goal protection? How do we delay and deny and dictate? Breaking down all the details. Then it goes down to the transition philosophy. Eric Ten Hag loves to play with good quick transitions. What is the philosophy? The England transition philosophy is like so: in possession phases and out of possession phases, recognition of game situation and game state, decision making, fast individual action, unit and team reaction, stuff like that. This is all the work of the director of football, and this was the brain of Dan Ashworth and Gary Southgate, who is the England boss as we speak now. So you look at this document, it's a long one, but it just breaks down for you. It gives you a template of what he did with England, because exactly where England was a few years ago is where Manchester United is. And if you ask me, there is not a better person than this to lead it, because he has done this before. He's tried and tested. And for the people who are wondering why are we fascinated with Dan Ashworth, here is for me the main reason why he is the guy Manchester United is interested in, because what he did with England is exactly what we need, and we've seen the results. England were almost winning the Euros, and maybe in the future they could win a major title. So for me, that is why I will say, whereas he did not play football at the topmost level, whereas he wasn't your biggest footballer, Dan Ashworth is the man. Put him in the team that has got Omar Berada above as CEO to implement and head the operations of the game, with Jean-Claude Blanc seated on the board, with Eric Ten Hag as a manager and Paul Mitchell as the head of recruitment to now hire the players to fit into this DNA, the Man United DNA. Trust you me, Man United will be unstoppable. My name is Webb. Subscribe to the United Hotspot and let me catch you later, fam.